We asked senior recruiters how do they handle candidate ghosting. Here's revealing their best practices.
Yeah, again, I think this is a really good question. I was talking to a colleague of mine about this recently because she had a candidate who was ghosting her. And I said, how would you deal with this? And she said, I'd probably go into a room and cry.
Like ghosting happens, you're dealing with people, and at the end of the day, you can't, as much as you sometimes wish you could, you can't force people into returning your call or returning your email or coming back to you, or you can't really force them if they do come back to you to give you a reason why.
So ghosting is always going to happen. You just have to not take it personally. You have no idea what's going on in that person's life. If it's a candidate, they could have a million different job opportunities coming in. It could be family, it could be work, it could be anything. So just do not take it personally. Be polite, persistent, and then move on. Afterwards, especially if it's a candidate that gets in the process and they drop out and they ghost you, you can always ask why and give them enough breathing space and time to do that. And what I always advise clients to do with Equitas whenever they see this happen is you should analyze your process afterwards as well. Was it interview fatigue? Real thing for both candidates and interviewers alike. Did you have too many rounds? Was there another reason the candidate ghosted you? Could be anything. So yeah, don't prejudge and don't jump to conclusions and make those assumptions. Just move on and then try and analyze afterwards if you can.
Assuming we're talking about the scenario where it's a ghosting situation where I've already engaged the candidate, we have some repartee going and they've expressed some interest, but then all of a sudden they disappear off the radar. In a situation like that, I assume that there has to be a reason. They didn't just forget about me because I typically stay in regular contact, and that's something that's very important also. But in a situation like that, I try to be very direct in addressing the situation. I will say I will send the person an email or leave them a message, and I will say something to the effect of, look, I noticed that you haven't responded to my last couple of emails or my last voicemail. I'm going to assume that you found another opportunity. So I'm probably going to be going ahead with another candidate, unless I'm wrong, and in which case, please get back to me and maybe we can get things back on track. But if not, I wish you the best of luck. So I gave them an opportunity and now I'm pulling it back. And now, if they are interested, they're going to respond. But if they're not, good. I just, clean that opportunity off the slate.
I think you could prevent a lot of ghosting by really working on the relationship build. If you spend enough time getting to know your candidates more on a personal level, you start that emotional connection, and it's much harder to ghost somebody when you really like someone. So don't just be a recruiter. They should know your name, maybe a little bit about you. Texting definitely helps. So being able to text each other and say, hey, good luck today on your interview, or hey, how was it? That sets yourself apart from just any other recruiter. So that's how I would handle. I would honestly just try to prevent it. Is it going to happen every once in a while? It's going to happen. But texting, calling, don't just rely on email. I think a lot of people tend to rely on email, and I don't know about anybody else, but in these days, my personal email full of junk. So I don't check it a whole lot.
So I think particularly if you're kind of a junior recruiter, it takes some time to learn how to spot it quite early on. So generally when you're having that first conversation with a candidate, you can sometimes gauge if they're really committed to finding a job and finding out if they've got a lot of other interviews going on, finding out if they've got holidays coming up, finding out what's going on in their life. So not just talking to them about the jobs, but kind of finding out more about them and really listening to them and kind of knowing what their real situation is and really understanding, are they just looking for a job to maybe try and get a pay rise where they are? Or are they actually ready to leave that place and committed to this role you're talking to them about, this company you're talking to them about? Is this what they really want? And I think that's something you tend to, you kind of start to get it after some time. But when you first start off, it's kind of keeping in touch with them as much as you can. But if they do ghost you, it's, I don't want to say hassling them, but contacting them regularly enough. So they might just come back and go, leave me alone. They might come back and say, I'm not looking anymore. Sometimes they won't come back. And I think one of the things that I tend to do if someone's not responded for some time is just to send them a email and just say, look, I haven't heard from you a while. I'll assume you're not looking or not interested in this opportunity. If I don't hear from you in 2-3 days, I'll assume that's the case. But if you are looking for something else, or this isn't right for you, or you want to have a chat further down the line, I'm always here. And it leaves that door open, so it doesn't close them off, because life happens, I guess. It might be a family emergency. They might be at final stages elsewhere, and they've got a big presentation that they need to do, and that's their focus. You don't know. And I think that's one of the things that you can't ever shut that door. And as a recruiter, you sometimes have to not be walked over, but you sometimes have to accept that it's going to happen, because you're not always someone's priority, but they could be the perfect person for you further down the line. So I don't know if you can always turn it around for everyone, but I always think there is an opportunity to get them back at some point, unless you really annoy them. But other than that, I think you can generally get them back.
I think, for me, when I think about ghosting, and maybe this is that kind of older school mentality of being a recruiter that I have, but I think something's gone wrong in that process. If someone isn't answering my calls, I have to take accountability for something. And the way that I would try and reduce ghosting is by having the communication with that candidate on a regular basis. The more you speak to someone, the more you build rapport with them, the more they trust you. And they can kind of, you finish a call and you say, when are you free to speak next? They give you a date, they give you a time. Then that will reduce the level of ghosting that you're going to have. But if the conversation starts to run a little bit dry and that person isn't showing their availability or their enthusiasm, then naturally down the line, they are probably going to stop answering your calls, or maybe they're going to show that they're not as interested in the opportunity. Maybe something else that's coming along that's better. So I think my approach, if someone does start ghosting, is, again, very kind of, I guess, a tactic that not everyone would want to do, but I would call them from different numbers. If they don't know the number, then maybe they'd answer the phone. I would message them from different sources, so whether it's LinkedIn message, an email, using social media. But ultimately, if that person doesn't want to speak to me, just give them some space, And then I'd imagine after a few weeks or a month or so later, they've forgotten about you in some ways. And then you reapproach, they're like, oh my God, yeah, we spoke before. Let's have another conversation.
Yeah, this is a hard one for me. I think this is the first year, or last year started this process of candidates ghosting people. I'd never experienced that in my career. And so I think we've all had to adapt. And in this market, it's such a tough market with little to no candidates and a ton of jobs, you're going to get some of this. And I think the way for me is, if I think it's truly someone I need to talk to, that I think they're just the perfect fit, then I just am persistent. And if they ghosted me, I don't take it personally, and I just keep trying. On the ones that ghost me where I was kind of iffy, I kind of don't waste my time. It's just not worth me going after them if they didn't feel like it was worth it. But sometimes things happen too, right? So I always, if it's somebody I think is a fit, I am definitely persistent about it.
So, when a candidate ghosts, it really comes down to determining the why. And if that why is anything other than, some sort of catastrophic event in their life or something like that, I tell junior recruiters, don't get hung up on it. You quote unquote dodged a bullet, because the reality is, if that's kind of how they handle themselves and they're comfortable just sort of ghosting an engagement, that's probably not a candidate you want to represent to your clients anyhow. And I know that sounds a little mean, but if you think about yourself and think about the standards that you hold yourself accountable to, because number one, the first thing you want to do is hold yourself accountable to not ghosting somebody else. And getting them to come around, I don't think there actually is a getting them to come around. Things have happened, and as I've gone through my career, I've had candidates whose spouses died, randomly in the middle of the process and things like that. So there's expectations that things may happen where people may, disappear for a period of time, but that's not really the same as ghosting. If somebody's truly ghosting you, My recommendation is don't focus on getting them to come around. Just walk away and move on to the next one, because the reality was they're not the best candidate.
Well, first of all, I don't really know I don't handle ghosting. I've got to tell you this story. So I had a candidate apply for a position, and this will just tell you about the state of the industry right now. He applied for a position, and I reached out to him, sent him a message, said, thank you for applying. I'd love to speak to you about the role, all this stuff. He came back to me and just his only reply was NTY. No, thank you. He couldn't even spell out no thank you. It was just NTY as the response I got. So, that's what we're dealing with now. And I think we just have to kind of just cut our losses when something like that happens and be quick to move on. We do have to, be a little introspective when that does happen, though. If you are in the process with somebody and then they just ghost you, then you have to really ask why. Was it something about the process that made them uneasy? Did you take too long? Were you not responsive? Those kind of questions. And then, you can always reach out with an apology if it was something like that and just say, hey, I realize I dropped the ball on this. You're a really great candidate. I'd love to speak, but it may or may not work, but at least that's the least you can do.
Yeah, I feel like recruiting in general is so much like dating, right? Like I've been married for 15 years, so I can only assume it's like dating, but the whole process of sourcing and screening and the face-to-face interview and the talent assessment, all of that kind of stuff. And so ghosting is so real, even with candidates. They just, no matter how friendly you are, no matter how knowledgeable you are, how great the interview or the date had gone, ghosting is inevitable. I just try, my personality is very much like, I've been in this long enough, it's never personal. So just trying to make sure that my last point of contact with them, I kind of leave it on them. Like, hey, just wanted to make sure you're okay, that nothing happened. And then just keep it friendly. If you have any questions or, if there's anything else I can do to help clarify anything for you, I think just keeping it friendly and keeping that door open. And it can be hard, right? Because especially if they're ghosting third round interview or whatever, and you're like, oh, but I thought they were interested. Just keeping it casual and not taking it personal, that lightness tends to have them turn around a little bit. I think I've had more success with a friendly, hey, checking in, are you alive kind of thing, where it's on them. I want to make sure you didn't die. That's been great.
Okay. Well, number one, I would say, firstly, don't take it personally. Okay. That's what I will say. And I think there are several reasons as to why candidates do ghost. And I think if we look at the two main reasons, one is they're usually in a position where they don't want to come back to you and say no. They actually don't want to deliver that negative of they're not interested or whatever it is. And the other point is that they just don't care. So what we want to try and do is mitigate some of that. So come in from a position of support. So what you want to do is take that defense out of your world and think, okay, when I go back to this candidate, I want to understand closure. So what do you need to learn from that experience? So your language could be, well, look, I appreciate that I haven't heard from you, but what I would like is just to understand why. So for me, that's important, so I can learn from it. It's okay if you've changed your mind, but I just want to see if there's anything I can learn within that process. And use the word help as well. So you probably find that out of X emails or X outreach, you'll get some of that back. Some people just won't care, but that's okay. But try and use it from a position of you wanting closure or wanting to understand why or where their decision is. Doesn't matter that they reached a decision that's not favourable, but what is it about it?